Today, we'll talk about conflict. One of my research specialties is organizational communication. In the past, I used to teach group communication and organizational communication. So, for this conflict lecture, many of the examples are from coworkers, supervisor relationships, and workplaces, and team projects. I hope that you can draw implications which you can apply to other interpersonal relationships in your life as well. This slide shows a report of survey results. When asked what percentage of management time is spent on conflict management, managers said 18% on average. Although staff management is part of the job for supervisors, too much time spent handling disputes gets in the way of business priorities and often signals that a larger issue needs to be addressed. For example, being chronically short-staffed can cause friction among employees, as can an overly competitive work environment. Workplace conflict can never be fully eliminated, but there are steps managers can take to foster greater team harmony. And there are a ton of advices out there about how to handle and minimize conflict. For example, some of the advices include things like you need to know when to step in. That is, choose your battle. You do not want to interject every time a minor issue arises, but you cannot afford to turn a blind eye to problems that jeopardize the group's output. You also need to help employees get to know each other. Provide opportunities for your staff to interact in non-work activities, such as lunches or volunteer activities. Familiarity can breed greater understanding. You also need to reward positive role models. Give your praise, promotions, and choice assignments to individuals who contribute to a supportive work environment. Recognizing staff for being team players sends a clear message that how they interact with others is as important as their job performance. Many of conflict advices sound good, and many of us already know about them. But somehow, conflicts are inevitable. Ghosts and goblins, who traditionally make their appearance on October 31st, may have office counterparts whose behaviors bedevil their managers throughout the year. When people are interacting with one another, working on class projects, developing and maintaining romantic relationships, even among friends and at workplaces, even small disagreements can cause friction. For our partners in various interpersonal relationships, we may be able to reduce disharmony by being aware of individuals' habits that disrupt productivity, and we can decrease disagreement by nipping problems in the bud. Taking a workplace as an example, here are some common year-round workplace goblins. Some of these types may apply to your team members for your team project. The laughing hyena. This personality type finds everything funny, especially her own jokes. She's not aware that her voice carries and can be heard many cubicles away. You may have a team member or work friend who just loves to hear herself and consider what she says as funny or important all the time. In order to deal with the laughing hyena, You need to encourage team members to try to keep their voices down during conversations and find a way to take turns equally during a meeting. Again, then, ghost employee. There's nothing quite as frustrating as a staff member you can never find. Whether out on official business or not, some people seem perpetually away from the office and turn up only rarely for meetings and group events. These ghost-like characters may not realize they have this reputation and are certainly not prone to correcting it, unless managers regularly remind the entire staff of the importance of being accessible. The witch's brewer. It's hard for people to concentrate on their work when they are overcome by the smell of someone's microwaved popcorn or reheated dinner. This witch's brewer is not just about food smells, but more about self-centeredness. You do not need to single out offenders, but you need to mention in team meetings that it is inconsiderate for staff to eat especially pungent food at their desks. The office spook. This type enjoys scaring coworkers, especially new ones, about the hardships of working at your business. This type person tends to be quite pessimistic. He may say something like, "If you think we've had it tough so far, just wait until the spring season," scaring others that more difficult times is coming. Painting the boss as a fire-breathing ogre or monster and spreading other tales of scary and fearful stuff are this person's specialty. The office spook tends to dampen the mood of team members and hurt the morale. The office spook may be someone you have to approach individually to turn around this pessimism. We may simply think that conflict is just one episode, but as shown in this slide, research has shown that conflict tends to go through these 5 stages. Of these 5 stages, the number 4, manifest conflict, is the one that is most familiar to us. When we think of conflict as lay people, we tend to focus on these actual behaviors of conflict, such as yelling, even physical aggression. But under the surface, the other 4 stages, namely latent conflict, perceived conflict, felt conflict, conflict aftermath, they play important roles in how we manage our interpersonal relationships and communication with various people. Let's examine each stage in detail. Let's talk about phases of conflict. First, latent conflict. This is not a full-blown fight, so to speak, yet, but it is about the potential for conflict. For example, decisions about responsibility and authority, control of resources, goals, and activities in the pursuit of goals all are necessary for organizational functioning. Yet, few, if any, organizations make these decisions with a total agreement of all members. In other words, the daily functioning of the organization generates disagreement and conflict. When someone gets appointed as a new manager, this appointment over, let's say, 2 or 3 qualified applicants can be considered as a latent conflict condition. For another example, when an organization introduces new computer system, this kind of organizational change has the potential to generate conflict. There can be people who support the new system, and there are others who prefer the old system. As team members fulfill multiple roles, these diverse roles may carry different and sometimes incompatible requirements, and again, underlying conditions for conflict. Okay, is this statement you see on this slide correct or incorrect, true or false? Latent conflict conditions always exist in one form or another. Is it true or is it false? Second, latent conflict always produce overt conflict. Is it true or is it false? The answer is, as you guessed, true and false. If one or more of the parties become aware of the conditions for conflict, that is, one views another as having incompatible goals and potentially blocking his or her own goal achievement, latent conflict becomes perceived conflict. Now, is this statement correct or incorrect? In the perceived conflict stage, it is possible only one person in a relationship or situation will perceive a potential conflict. Is this true or false? True. It's a true. Let me give you an example of perceived conflict at workplace. Problems between supervisors and employees can arise. For example, when a supervisor sees a performance problem that the employee does not. Likewise, an employee may define the lack of supervisory feedback as a problem, whereas the supervisor believes additional communication is unnecessary. As people start realizing they have different evaluations of the same event, perceived conflict gets started. If an actual conflict occurs, we have a tendency to conceptualize or define probable outcomes resulting from the conflict. In other words, it is our ego investment stage. Our perception of the importance of the problem, our motives, and the motives of others, and the varying abilities and relative power positions of those involved all contribute to the emotional impact or the felt conflict. For most of us, seeing a possible difference with a coworker is a different emotional experience from seeing that same possible differences with the boss. It is not that the difference with the boss isn't necessarily worse, only that the relationships are different. Similarly, emotional experience in our conflict with a boyfriend when dating is different from emotional experience later when the boyfriend becomes husband. Similarly, for a similar type of disagreement, felt conflict can be different for a same-sex friend versus a romantic partner. The emotional impact of the problem is linked to the value we place on the specific relationship. To put another way, the felt conflict stage is an expansion of the perceived conflict stage. Perceptions are intensified by our emotional reactions to the potential conflict. Think again about the potential situation you identified for the perceived conflict. How did your emotional reaction influence your behavior? What was the most important to you as you considered what was going to happen? Were you aware of consciously considering your behavioral choices? Number 4 stage, manifest conflict. It is about actual conflict behavior such as open aggression, covert or overt action, or in a constructive sense, engaging in behaviors for problem solving and numerous other possibilities. Actual conflict behaviors are influential for determining the productivity of the conflict. That is, what you actually do during the conflict will influence the way conflict participants will interact in the future. This is basically action time of conflict, the time when the lead blows off and we really get down to the business. In this stage, communication behavior is influenced by participant conflict preferences, perceptions of rules of interaction, power relationships, roles, and skills and abilities. All too often, it is this manifest stage that we recognize as conflict without realizing the powerful influence of previous stages. Number 5, conflict aftermath. Put simply, this stage is what happens as a result of the other 4 stages in terms of both issues and relationships. It is the stage where we evaluate the conflict as either productive or counterproductive. Conflict can disrupt communication, produce psychological scars, and disrupt individual relationships, groups, or even entire organizations. Conflict permits individuals and organizations to develop new ideas and approaches and to become actively involved in necessary change. Okay, A or B? For organizations, conflict is an essential or disastrous process for continued operation. The answer is A. Conflict is essential. And with or without conflict, organizations stagnate and die. The answer is without. We need conflict. This slide shows an example of conflict resolution self-assessment tools. You can self-check which conflict management or resolution style you are more likely to adopt, generally speaking. Give it a try. Please pause this video and indicate your endorsement for each of these 15 statements. Did you indicate your preferences for each of those 15 statements? Now, this slide shows how you can score your responses to these questions. Which style represent your preferences best?